In the closing years of the 19th century, as the Atlantic Ocean still ruled the routes of empire and immigration, a bold ambition took shape to build a vessel that would defy its relentless gales and vast distances, not through sheer speed, but through unmatched size, comfort, and elegance. The White Star Line, under the steady hand of Thomas Henry Ismay, had long championed reliability and luxury over the raw haste of rivals. Cunard's crack express liners, Campania and Lucania, held the blue ribbon with their blistering crossings, while German ships from the Norddeutscher Lloyd pressed ever harder. Yet Ismay envisioned something greater, a ship so grand it would redefine transatlantic travel, drawing the wealthiest passengers and the hopeful masses alike into a floating palace. This was no mere steamer, it was to be the ship of the century, a statement in steel that White Star would lead the age. At Harland and Wolff's Queen's Island Yard in Belfast, the keel of RMS Oceanic was laid down in 1897. The project demanded unprecedented resources. A new 500-ton overhead gantry crane rose above the slips, towering infrastructure born of necessity. Hydraulic riveting machines, used here for the first time at the yard, hammered plates with precision that older methods could never match. Over 1,500 shipwrights toiled across 2 years, shaping a hull that stretched 704 feet overall, longer than Brunel's legendary Great Eastern, though her gross tonnage of 17,274 placed her firmly in a new era of merchant giants. The ship's profile emerged sleek and purposeful, a single tall funnel, 4 masts for auxiliary sail if needed, and an integrated bridge structure that gave her a clean, fluid silhouette against the horizon. Her beam of 68.4 feet allowed spacious interiors without sacrificing stability in heavy seas. Twin triple expansion engines, the largest reciprocating set yet fitted to a merchant vessel, promised a service speed of 19.5 knots, steady, not record-breaking, but reliable enough to command schedules and passenger confidence. On January 14, 1899, more than 50,000 spectators gathered along the River Lagan, dignitaries including the Marquis of Dufferin, the Duke of Abercorn, and Lord Londonderry among them. As Mrs. Ismay released the champagne, the great hull slid gracefully into the water, her launch a moment of quiet triumph rather than noisy spectacle. The Belfast newsletter captured the awe. Crowds cheered as the Leviathan moved, her lines promising a new chapter in ocean travel. Passengers who would soon board her dreamed of the voyage ahead. First-class travelers anticipated marble fireplaces, domed libraries bathed in electric light, and dining saloons where orchestras played beneath gilded ceilings. Immigrants in third class looked forward to cleaner berths and organized meals, a marked improvement over older steamers. Crew members, from engineers to stewards, sensed pride in serving aboard what newspapers hailed as the Queen of the Ocean. Yet beneath the celebration lay the unspoken challenge: could such size tame the North Atlantic's fury? The answer would unfold on her maiden voyage, but for now, the ambition stood complete, a still promise against the endless gray sea. The true gamble lay not in daring the Atlantic's speed, but in stretching steel to limits never before tested on the high seas, creating a hull so vast that stability, vibration, and power distribution became engineering riddles demanding novel solutions. Harland and Wolff approached the project with calculated audacity. The keel plates alone required a new 500-ton overhead gantry crane, erected specifically to handle the unprecedented scale. For the first time at the yard, hydraulic riveting machines replaced hand-driven ones, delivering uniform pressure to thousands of rivets and ensuring watertight integrity across the 704-foot length. The hull form, long, narrow, with a fine entry and run, promised efficiency through water, yet risked flexing under load. To counter this, designers incorporated a strong longitudinal framing system and heavy plating at the bilges, distributing stresses that could have buckled lesser vessels in heavy following seas. The propulsion system represented the chapter's boldest wager. Twin four-cylinder triple expansion engines, the largest reciprocating set ever installed in a merchant ship, developed 28,000 indicated horsepower. 15 double-ended return tube boilers fed 96 furnaces, generating steam at 215 pounds per square inch. These engines drove two massive propellers, each with 3 blades, through forged steel shafts. Service speed settled at 19.5 knots, reliable for schedule keeping, though trials touched 21 knots. Excessive vibration at higher revolutions, a consequence of the ship's slender proportions, forced White Star to temper expectations. The engines hummed smoothly at cruising power, their rhythmic throb a comforting pulse beneath the decks. A key innovation addressed steering challenges on such a long hull, the balanced rudder. Unlike traditional designs where the rudder stock bore full pressure, Oceanic's rudder featured a forward extension, reducing helm effort and improving maneuverability in harbors or tight turns. This subtle refinement, born of hydrodynamic study, allowed precise handling despite the vessel's 17,274 gross tons displacement. The New York Times, reporting on trials, noted the engine's quiet operation. The machinery works with remarkable smoothness, and there is an entire absence of the vibration which has been so noticeable in some recent large steamers. Engineers aboard during shakedown runs recorded steady coal consumption, around 250 tons per day, ensuring economical operation across the Atlantic. Crew in the engine rooms felt the gamble's weight most keenly. Stokers shoveled coal into roaring furnaces under electric lighting, a novelty that eased night watches. Junior engineers monitored gauges that glowed with promise and peril. One misstep in pressure management could cascade into disaster. Yet the plant proved robust, its redundancy, separate engine rooms divided by bulkheads, offering safety in an age when single-screw failures still haunted memory. As fitting out progressed, the gamble paid early dividends. The hull floated true, her metacentric height providing gentle rolling in harbor swells. Passengers would soon marvel at the absence of the violent pitching common to smaller liners. But the ocean waited to test these calculations fully, on the maiden voyage, when wind and wave would probe every rivet and seam. The technical foundation stood firm, a triumph of Belfast iron and ingenuity, ready to carry dreams across the gray expanse. Even as RMS Oceanic slipped into the Lagan's waters, an invisible contest simmered across the North Atlantic, nations and lines vying not just for passengers, but for prestige in an era when the fastest or grandest ship symbolized industrial supremacy. The White Star Line had deliberately chosen a different path from Cunard's pursuit of the blue riband. While Cunard's companion in Lucania sliced the ocean at over 21 knots, claiming record after record, Thomas's May prioritized comfort, size, and reliability. Oceanic would not chase headlines with blistering runs. She would offer a steadier, more luxurious crossing that appealed to the growing tide of wealthy Americans and Europeans, alongside the millions immigrating from steerage. German rivals, Norddeutscher Lloyd's Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse and the emerging Hapag fleet, pushed speed aggressively, their ships often adorned with imperial eagles and touted in Berlin newspapers as triumphs of Titanic engineering. Yet White Star's strategy bet on volume and elegance. Larger capacity meant more revenue, and unmatched accommodations drew the elite who value calm seas over record times. The rivalry sharpened in the shipyards. Harland and Wolff's Belfast works faced direct competition from Clydebank and German docks, where faster construction and bolder designs vied for contracts. Oceanic's very existence challenged the status quo at 17,274 gross tons and 704 feet. She eclipsed every merchant vessel afloat until the arrival of bigger sisters. The press framed the contest vividly. The New York Times, in advance coverage, declared her arrival marking a new era in steam navigation, in marine architecture, and in the history of the White Star Line. British papers contrasted her measured approach with Cunard's express ethos, while American outlets marveled at the shift toward floating hotels. Passengers embodied the stakes. First-class luminaries booked suites months ahead, drawn by promises of libraries with mahogany shelves, smoking rooms paneled in figured oak, and promenades wide enough for afternoon strolls without crowding. In third class, families from Ireland, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe saw Oceanic as a safer, more dignified passage, berths arranged in compartments rather than open dormitories, with dedicated dining spaces and electric lighting. One steerage passenger, writing later in a preserved letter home, described the anticipation. "We heard she is the biggest ship ever, and they say even the poor folk will eat like gentlemen." Crew felt the tension too. Officers compared notes on rival vessels during layovers in Liverpool. Engineers studied German turbine experiments with wary curiosity. Captain John G. Cameron, commanding the maiden run, knew every knot mattered for reputation, even if not for a formal record. The shipyard buzz carried whispers of secret modifications to counter vibration complaints from earlier trials, adjustments to propeller pitch and shaft alignment, to ensure a smooth debut. As September 6, 1899, approached, the Atlantic waited like a silent judge. Departure from Liverpool's Prince's Landing stage drew crowds. Tugs nudged the giant into the Mersey under clear skies. With 1,456 souls aboard, 410 first, 300 second, and the rest third, the crossing began. No blue ribbon hung in the balance, yet the voyage carried the weight of proving White Star's vision, that grandeur could outshine haste. The first days passed in calm anticipation, the engines turning steadily at 19 knots. But the ocean held its secrets, and the true test of this quiet rivalry lay ahead. The engine room of RMS Oceanic concealed innovations that few outsiders ever glimpsed, quiet revolutions in power and control that made her massive size not a burden, but a balanced masterpiece of Victorian engineering. Deep below the waterline, the twin triple expansion engines dominated the vast spaces. Each set featured 4 cylinders, high pressure at 32 inches diameter, intermediate at 52 inches, and 2 low pressure at 94 inches, all working on 78-inch strokes. Steam entered at 215 pounds per square inch from 15 double-ended boilers, stoked by 96 furnaces fed by skilled firemen working in shifts. The engines developed 28,000 indicated horsepower, yet designers incorporated forced draft fans to maintain pressure without excessive smoke, a refinement that kept the single tall funnel clean and efficient. Shafts ran aft through watertight bulkheads, turning 3-bladed propellers of manganese bronze, each weighing over 20 tons, designed to minimize cavitation at service revolutions. A hidden innovation addressed the vibration that had plagued earlier large liners. Harland and Wolff engineers adjusted propeller pitch and balanced the cranks with meticulous care during fitting out trials in Belfast Lock. They also installed longitudinal bulkheads to stiffen the hull against torsional stresses, preventing the flexing that could loosen fittings or fatigue steel over thousands of miles. The balanced rudder, with its forward airfoil section, reduced steering torque by nearly half compared to conventional designs, allowing the helmsman to hold course with light pressure even in cross seas. Electric lighting throughout, over 3,000 lamps, represented another secret leap forward. Dynamos driven by the main engine supplied current for chandeliers, cabin fixtures, and even searchlights on the bridge wings. Ventilation fans circulated fresh air to every compartment, a comfort unknown on older steamers where passengers often endured stuffy, coal-dusted passages. The New York Times, after inspecting the vessel pre-voyage, praised the machinery's restraint. The engines work with a smoothness that is almost uncanny for such power. There is no jar, no tremor to disturb the passenger in the saloon above. Captain Cameron's log from shakedown runs recorded steady performance. Coal consumption held at economical levels, around 250 tons daily, while boiler pressure remained constant through varying weather. Crew in the stokeholds knew these secrets intimately. Firemen, stripped to the waist under the glare of electric bulbs, shoveled coal with rhythmic precision, their sweat mingling with the scent of hot oil and steam. One veteran stoker later recalled in a newspaper interview the quiet pride. "She don't roar like the old ones, she just hums along, steady as a clock." Junior engineers monitored telegraphs and gauges, their hands steady on brass wheels that controlled everything from feed pumps to ash ejectors. These hidden refinements ensured Oceanic could carry her unprecedented load, over 1,700 passengers and crew, without strain. As the maiden voyage loomed, the engine room stood ready, its secrets coiled like the power within the boilers. The Atlantic would soon reveal whether Belfast's ingenuity had truly tamed the elements. The first high-speed crossing awaited, where every revolution would count toward proving the gamble worthwhile. The tension mounted as RMS Oceanic cleared the Irish coast on September 6, 1899, her decks alive with the hum of departure, passengers peering into the gray North Atlantic, where the first high-speed crossing would either crown her a legend or expose flaws in her ambitious design. Liverpool's Prince's Landing stage faded astern under a crisp autumn sky, the single funnel trailing a thin plume of smoke as the engines built to cruising revolutions. The weather held fair at first, a gentle southwest breeze rippling the sea into low swells that tested the hull's metacentric height. Oceanic rode easily, her 68-foot beam providing the stability that smaller liners envied. The balanced rudder responded crisply to helm commands, allowing Captain Cameron to steer a great circle route with confidence. Below, the triple expansion engines thrummed at 78 strokes per minute, propelling the 17,274-ton giant at a steady 19 knots, her bow slicing through waves with minimal spray, thanks to the flared forecastle. The aesthetic allure unfolded immediately. First-class promenades, lined with teak planking polished to a warm glow, offered vistas of endless ocean under the arc of four masts rigged for signal flags. Interiors gleamed, the grand staircase descended in sweeps of oak and wrought iron, lit by electric globes that cast a soft, inviting light. Dining saloons featured frescoed ceilings and tables set with silver, where passengers dined amid the faint vibration of machinery far below. Human stories wove through the voyage. In first class, industrialists like J. Pierpont Morgan's associates mingled with opera stars, their conversations echoing in smoking rooms scented with cigar smoke and leather. A passenger diary, preserved in the White Star archives, captured the mood. "The ship is magnificent, we feel no motion, only the thrill of progress across the deep." In third class, immigrants shared tales of new lives in America, families from rural Ireland huddling in well-ventilated compartments, the air fresh from forced fans, a far cry from the dank holds of older vessels. Crew members, 350 strong, moved with practiced efficiency. Stewards in crisp uniforms served meals, while engineers monitored boiler pressures, noting in the log how the plant held steady without undue strain. The New York Times telegrammed early reports: Oceanic making fine passage, speed excellent, comfort supreme. Yet tension lingered. Mid-crossing, a moderate gale rose, winds gusting to 40 knots, waves cresting at 20 feet. The hull flexed but held, her longitudinal framing absorbing the punishment. Passengers felt the deck pitch gently, chandeliers swaying like pendulums in the saloons. Arrival in New York on September 13th brought triumph. 6 days, 2 hours, and 37 minutes, respectable, if not record-setting. Crowds lined the piers, cheering as tugs eased her to berth. The maiden success silenced doubters, affirming White Star's vision. But greater glories awaited, as the ship settled into her role as a floating cathedral of the seas. What made RMS Oceanic feel less like a steel vessel and more like a grand hotel drifting across the Atlantic was the lavish care lavished on every visible inch, an interior world of polished wood, crystal, and soft electric glow that transported passengers far from the rolling sea outside. The designers at Harland and Wolff, working closely with White Star's vision, rejected the stark functionalism of earlier liners. Instead, they created public rooms that echoed the opulence of London's finest clubs and New York's newest hotels. The Grand Saloon, spanning the full beam of the ship, featured a domed ceiling painted with classical motifs, cherubs and garlands in soft pastel tones, lit by rows of electric chandeliers that cast a warm, steady light without the flicker of gas lamps. Mahogany paneling, carved with restrained elegance, rose to meet friezes of gilt and plasterwork. Heavy velvet drapes framed the large portholes, softening the view of endless gray waves. The first-class library stood as a particular jewel, shelves of figured oak lined with leather-bound volumes, deep armchairs upholstered in Morocco leather, and writing desks fitted with silver inkstands. Electric reading lamps with green glass shades invited quiet hours, while the faint scent of beeswax polished and fresh flowers lingered in the air. The smoking room, paneled in bird's-eye maple and furnished with leather sofas, offered a masculine retreat where gentlemen retired after dinner to cigars and brandy. A passenger wrote in her preserved diary from the maiden voyage, "It is impossible to believe we are at sea. The room feels like a drawing room in Mayfair. Only the gentle roll reminds one of the ocean beneath." Even second-class spaces received thoughtful attention. Dining saloons with white and gold ceilings, comfortable settees, and large windows that flooded the areas with natural light. Third-class accommodations marked a revolution. Instead of cramped, open dormitories, passengers found 2- and 4-berth cabins with electric lighting, proper ventilation, and separate dining rooms serving hot meals on china plates. The contrast with older immigrant ships drew grateful comments. One steerage traveler noted in a letter home, "We have beds with sheets, and the food is warm, no more sleeping on benches in the dark." Aesthetic details extended to the promenades. Teak decking, laid in wide sweeps, glowed underfoot, brass handrails caught the light, and canvas awnings shielded passengers from sun or light rain. The ship's profile, long, low, with a single graceful funnel, presented a dignified silhouette that newspapers described as majestic yet restrained. These surroundings created an atmosphere of calm detachment from the elements. While the North Atlantic could rage beyond the hull, inside the ship passengers moved through a world of comfort and refinement, where every chandelier's glow and every carved detail spoke of an era at its confident peak. The illusion held beautifully during fair crossings, But the true test of this floating palace would come when the social machinery beneath the splendor faced the demands of a full complement on a stormy passage. Beneath the polished surfaces and glowing chandeliers of RMS Oceanic ran an invisible hierarchy that mirrored the rigid class structure of the Gilded Age, luxury flowing freely above, while careful order and separation governed life below decks. The ship functioned as a self-contained society of nearly 2,000 souls, divided into 3 distinct worlds connected only by narrow companionways and service stairs. First class occupied the grandest spaces, suites with private bathrooms, private promenades screened from the wind, and access to the library, music room, and dining saloon where white-gloved stewards served courses on fine china. Gentlemen in dinner jackets gathered in the smoking room after port, discussing stocks and politics over brandy, while ladies in evening gowns descended the grand staircase for concerts or card games. The atmosphere carried the scent of fresh orchids, cigar smoke, and expensive perfume, a bubble of privilege insulated from the elements. Second class enjoyed comfortable but restrained elegance, spacious lounges with upholstered settees, a library of its own, and dining saloons lit by electric fixtures. Passengers here, often professionals, clergy, or merchants, mingled in a quieter camaraderie, reading newspapers or playing pianos provided for entertainment. The separation from first class remained firm, shared decks existed, but social custom and physical barriers, gates, notices, and watchful crew discouraged mingling. Third class formed the largest group, carrying the human tide of immigration. Cabins arranged in 2 to 6 berth compartments replaced the old open dormitories, each fitted with electric lights, wash basins, and proper bedding. Separate dining saloons served hearty meals, porridge, soup, meat, potatoes, on tin plates, with stewards ensuring order. Open deck space allowed fresh air and exercise, though canvas partitions shielded steerage promenades from the wind and spray. Families clustered together, sharing stories in thick accents. Children played quoits or tag under the watchful eyes of matrons. One Irish immigrant wrote in a preserved letter dated 1900, "The ship is clean and the food good. We are treated like people, not cargo. Up above they live like kings, but down here we have hope." Crew bridged these worlds with practiced discretion. Stewards in first class moved like silent shadows, anticipating every need. Engineers and firemen labored unseen in the heat and noise below. Deck officers enforced boundaries with quiet authority. The ship's purser managed the intricate logistics of class distinction, separate galleys, laundries, even different water supplies, to prevent any blurring of lines. This social machinery operated smoothly in fair weather, sustaining the illusion that wealth and station could be preserved even at sea. Yet when gales struck, the divisions tested. First-class passengers retired to secure cabins, while steerage families huddled closer, sharing blankets and reassurance. The structure held, but the ocean reminded everyone of a shared vulnerability beneath the gilded divide. The daily rhythm of feeding thousands through fair days and foul would soon reveal the full complexity of keeping this floating city alive. The North Atlantic could turn savage without warning, and when it did, the impossible task of feeding nearly 2,000 passengers and crew through howling gales tested every layer of RMS Oceanic's carefully planned provisions and galleys. In fair weather the rhythm felt effortless. 3 separate galleys, one for each class, operated around the clock. The first-class kitchen, staffed by French-trained chefs, prepared multi-course menus, consommé, roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, poached salmon, and delicate soufflés, all served on Wedgwood china. Provisions loaded in Liverpool included thousands of pounds of fresh meat hung in refrigerated chambers, crates of vegetables, barrels of wine, and live poultry kept in coops on the boat deck. Bakers worked through the night, kneading dough for fresh rolls that filled the ship with the warm scent of yeast and crust. Stewards wheeled trolleys along carpeted corridors, balancing silver trays without a spill even as the ship rose and fell in moderate swells. Second class enjoyed hearty but refined fare, roast mutton, puddings, soups, while third-class dining rooms offered substantial meals, porridge at breakfast, thick stews, bread, cheese, and tea. The scale demanded precision. Daily consumption ran to roughly 4,000 pounds of bread, 2,000 pounds of meat, 1,500 pounds of potatoes, and gallons of milk from onboard cows milked each morning. Ice rooms preserved perishables, electric fans circulated cool air to slow spoilage. The purser's department tracked every item through ledgers, ensuring stocks lasted the 6-day crossing with margin for delays. Then came the gales. Winds climbed to 50 knots, waves reared 30 feet, and the ship pitched and rolled in a corkscrew motion that turned the galleys into battlegrounds. Pots slid across ranges, cooks braced themselves against bulkheads, securing lids with chains. Stewards in first class crawled along companionways to deliver soup in covered tureens, their trays lashed to wrists. In third class, families clung to mess tables bolted to the deck, sharing bread and cheese when hot food proved impossible. One passenger's diary from a stormy 1901 crossing recorded the ordeal. The ship groans like a living thing. Dinner was cold beef and biscuits brought by a steward soaked to the skin, yet he smiled and said, "She'll steady soon, sir." We ate what we could and were grateful. Engineers kept the galleys powered. Steam lines fed the ranges even as the ship heeled. Dynamos hummed steadily, lights never flickered. The refrigerated holds, insulated with cork and lined with zinc, protected the meat supply through days of violent motion. When seas breached the foredeck, water cascaded into chain lockers, but watertight doors held, and pumps cleared the bilges without interrupting the galleys. Through it all the human element endured. Chefs improvised when ovens tilted, stewards turned waiters into comforters, carrying trays to seasick passengers in their cabins. The invisible machinery of supply, loading gangs in port, storekeepers below, scullions scrubbing through the night, kept the floating city nourished. When the storm finally eased, leaving a trail of battered china and weary crew, the ship emerged stronger in reputation. Passengers spoke of the ordeal with quiet pride, proof that even in fury, Oceanic sustained life with dignity. The peak years lay ahead, when famous faces would walk her decks and add new layers to the growing mythos. The corridors and saloons of RMS Oceanic, once filled with the quiet rustle of silk gowns and the murmur of transatlantic deals, began to echo with the footsteps of the era's most celebrated figures, men and women whose presence turned routine crossings into chapters of living history. In the first years of the new century, the ship became a favored vessel for the transatlantic elite. Industrialists crossed regularly to oversee empires on both sides of the ocean. J. Pierpont Morgan himself traveled aboard several times, his private suite on the boat deck a fortress of dark paneling and heavy drapes where he conducted meetings over brandy and cigars. The financier's sharp gaze and low voice carried weight. Stewards recalled how even the captain deferred to him in casual conversation. Opera stars like Nellie Melba sailed with her entourage, her voice occasionally drifting through open doors during private recitals in the music room, the crystal chandeliers trembling faintly in resonance. Literary figures added their own glamour. Mark Twain made at least one crossing on Oceanic during his later lecture tours, his white suit unmistakable on the promenade deck as he leaned on the rail, watching the wake curl away. Passengers gathered discreetly to hear his drawling anecdotes about river boats and human folly. A New York Times reporter covering one such voyage noted, "Mr. Clements holds court in the smoking room, pipe in hand, regaling listeners with tales that make the Atlantic seem small." British politicians, including members of Parliament en route to Washington or Ottawa, filled the first-class lists. Their discussions in the library often turned to tariffs, naval treaties, or the growing tensions in Europe. Yet the ship's halls carried quieter ghosts too. Between the famous crossings came the ordinary but poignant passages, young brides traveling to join husbands in America, diplomats carrying sealed dispatches in locked briefcases, actors whose names would later shine on Broadway. One preserved passenger letter from 1903 described the atmosphere. "Last night the Duke of Connaught dined at the captain's table. Tonight a family from Galway sang old songs in third class. The ship holds them all, high and low, under the same stars." The aesthetic backdrop heightened every encounter. The grand staircase, with its wrought iron balustrade and soft electric glow, framed dramatic entrances. The library's leather-bound volumes and green-shaded lamps invited confidential talks. The wide promenades allowed celebrities to stroll in relative privacy, the teak deck warm underfoot even in chill air. Crew members developed a practiced discretion, never staring, always ready with a quiet "good evening, sir," or a fresh towel, turning the ship into a mobile sanctuary where fame could breathe. These crossings built the mythos. Newspapers printed passenger lists like social registers. Gossip columns speculated on shipboard romances or business alliances sealed over dinner. Oceanic became synonymous with the height of civilized travel, her decks a stage where the powerful and the hopeful briefly shared the same rolling horizon. But even in these golden years, the North Atlantic remained unforgiving. One night in particular, when the wind rose and the sea turned black, the ocean reminded everyone that no amount of celebrity or splendor could command the elements. One December night in 1902, as RMS Oceanic steamed westbound into the teeth of a full North Atlantic gale, the ocean mounted a fierce assault that nearly turned triumph into tragedy and reminded everyone aboard that no steel hull, however grand, could ever fully command the sea. The barometer had fallen steadily since noon. By dusk the wind howled at 60 knots from the northwest, whipping spray across the boat deck and driving green water over the forecastle head. Waves built to 35 feet, their crests breaking with a roar that drowned conversation in the saloons. The ship pitched heavily, her long hull rising to meet each crest then plunging into the troughs with a shudder that rattled chandeliers and sent loose objects sliding across cabin floors. Passengers in first class braced themselves in armchairs. Stewards moved along corridors with one hand on the brass rails, the other steadying trays of soup gone cold. The engineering plant held firm under the strain. Triple expansion engines continued their steady rhythm, though engineers reduced revolutions slightly to ease the pounding on the propellers. The balanced rudder demanded constant attention at the wheelhouse. Quartermaster and officer worked in shifts, sweat beading despite the chill draft through open ports. Longitudinal framing absorbed the flexing stresses, preventing the ominous creaks that had doomed lesser vessels. Yet the gale tested every seam. Water forced its way through ventilator cowls and hawse pipes, cascading into chain lockers and lower holds. Pumps rang continuously, their rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to the storm's fury. Human endurance became the real measure. In third class, families huddled in their compartments, mothers holding children close as the ship rolled 20 degrees to each side. One preserved account from a steerage passenger later appeared in a Liverpool newspaper. The ship groaned like she was alive and in pain. We prayed together, Irish and German alike, while the lamps swung wild overhead. But she never faltered, steady as a rock beneath the madness. First-class passengers fared better in their sheltered suites, yet even they felt the isolation, portholes darkened with solid water, the promenade deck a no-man's land of flying spray. Crew performed heroics quietly. Deckhands lashed down anything that moved, lifeboats, deck chairs, coiled lines, while wearing oilskin slick with salt. In the engine room, firemen braced against bulkheads to shovel coal, their faces streaked with soot and sweat. The single tall funnel streamed smoke low and black, proof the boilers still burned hot despite the rolling. Dawn brought no immediate relief, but the wind began to veer, easing the seas into long, heaving swells. By midday the gale moderated to a fresh breeze, the ship steadied, her engines resuming full service speed. Passengers emerged pale but grateful, exchanging quiet nods of shared survival. The captain's log recorded the event matter-of-factly: heavy gale, force 10 to 11, ship behaved admirably, no damage beyond minor shifting of stores. The ordeal forged deeper respect. Oceanic had not merely survived, she had carried her people through the storm with dignity intact, her hull and heart proving equal to the ocean's worst. Such nights entered the ship's lore, told in hushed tones over coffee in the smoking room. Yet even these trials paled beside the day when every ounce of power would be called upon to chase something far more fleeting than safety, pure, unyielding speed. While rivals chased the fleeting glory of the blue ribbon with turbine-driven speed, RMS Oceanic staked her claim on a different prize, the quiet dominance of being the largest, most stable passenger ship afloat, a floating proof that sheer scale and thoughtful design could conquer the Atlantic's worst moods without breaking a sweat. Her 704-foot hull and 17,274 gross tons made her the biggest merchant vessel in the world from 1899 until 1901, when White Star's Celtic edged her aside. Yet size alone invited skepticism. Critics warned of excessive rolling, sluggish handling, or structural strain in heavy weather. Oceanic answered with engineering that turned potential weakness into strength. The beam of 68.4 feet, generous for the era, lowered the center of gravity and raised metacentric height, giving her a gentle, predictable roll even in beam seas. Longitudinal framing, deep girders running fore and aft, stiffened the hull against the twisting forces of following or head seas, reducing the flex that plagued narrower competitors. The balanced rudder proved its worth time and again. Its forward extension had the torque required to turn the wheel, allowing precise course corrections with minimal effort. In harbor maneuvers or dodging ice off Newfoundland, captains praised the responsiveness. One entry in a relief captain's notebook read, "Helm light as a yacht's despite her length, she answers like a ship half her size." Propellers, three-bladed and carefully balanced during trials, minimized vibration at service speed. Engineers tuned the shaft alignment so finely that passengers in the Grand Saloon felt only a soft, rhythmic hum beneath their feet, no jarring resonance to rattle crystal or unsettle conversation. Stability translated directly to passenger comfort. Crossings that left smaller liner saloons half empty with seasickness saw Oceanic's dining rooms full night after night. The long, fine entry and run parted waves cleanly, spray rarely reached the boat deck. In moderate gales, where other ships pounded in ship-green water, Oceanic rose and fell with measured grace, her deck vibrations subdued enough for after-dinner orchestras to play without missing a note. A frequent first-class traveler wrote in 1904, "On the Oceanic one scarcely knows the sea is rough until looking out the porthole, inside it is calm as a country house." This reliability built loyalty. Schedules held firm, passengers booked return passages confident the ship would arrive on time, rested and unruffled. White Star advertised not records, but the steadiness of a great ship, and the claim rang true. Coal consumption stayed economical, around 250 tons daily, allowing profitable operation without the voracious appetite of faster express liners. The Triumph reached its quiet peak in routine service. No dramatic races, no broken records, just year after year of dependable Atlantic passages that carried the rich, the famous, and the hopeful without drama or delay. Oceanic became the benchmark against which newer giants measured themselves. Yet the very qualities that made her supreme would soon face subtler threats, as the world edged toward conflict and the familiar rhythms of peace began to falter. The summer of 1914 arrived like any other for RMS Oceanic, passengers booking summer crossings, stewards polishing brass, engineers tuning the engines for another season of steady Atlantic service, until the telegram from the Admiralty shattered the calm and transformed the grand liner into something unrecognizable. On August 4, 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. Within days, White Star received orders. Oceanic would be requisitioned as an armed merchant cruiser. The luxurious interiors vanished under haste. Gilded ceilings in the Grand Saloon received coats of gray paint. Crystal chandeliers came down, replaced by bare bulbs shielded for blackout. Mahogany paneling disappeared behind canvas screens. The library's leather-bound books were crated and stored ashore. The promenade decks, once alive with afternoon strolls, sprouted 4.7-inch guns, 2 forward, 2 aft, along with smaller quick-firing weapons and searchlights. The single tall funnel received drab camouflage, though her long, unmistakable profile still betrayed her origins. Crew felt the shift most keenly. Many officers and men volunteered for naval service. Those who remained wore khaki instead of white uniforms, their salutes sharper, conversations quieter. Captain H. Smith, a Royal Naval Reserve officer, took command, his log now recording gunnery drills rather than passenger counts. The engine room stayed much the same, triple expansion machinery reliable as ever, but coaling parties worked under armed guard, and watertight integrity checks grew obsessive. The ship's speed, never her strongest suit, now served patrol duties, slow, methodical sweeps of the northern approaches, hunting for German raiders or submarines. Passengers vanished entirely. The floating palace became a warship with a complement of 400 officers and men, her vast spaces echoing. Former first-class suites housed officers' cabins, third-class compartments stored ammunition and stores. The grand staircase, stripped of ornament, served as a utilitarian companionway. One surviving letter from a crewman, written in late 1914, captured the melancholy. She looks the same from the outside, but inside it's all guns and gray. The smell of polish is gone, now it's oil and cordite. We miss the music, the laughter. The change marked the end of an era. Oceanic had bridged the Gilded Age and the Edwardian calm, now she entered the grim machinery of modern war. Her role shifted to the 10th Cruiser Squadron, patrolling the North Sea and Atlantic trade routes, enforcing the blockade against Germany. In foul weather she rode heavily under the added top weight of guns and splinter protection, yet her size and stability, once luxuries, became assets, allowing her to keep station when smaller cruisers sought shelter. The camouflage paint weathered quickly in salt spray, rust bloomed along the hull where luxury fittings had been removed. Yet the engines turned steadily, the balanced rudder answered true. She was no longer a queen of peace, but a guardian in drab, a steel ghost carrying the weight of a world at war. The final test of her wartime service would come sooner than anyone expected, in waters far from the familiar passenger lanes. Even as RMS Oceanic patrolled the gray wastes of the North Sea in her drab wartime coat, Faster, sleeker shadows began to appear on the horizon, new liners whose revolutionary designs and blistering speed signaled that the age of the great reciprocating engine giants was quietly drawing to a close. Cunard had struck first. In 1907 Lusitania and Mauretania entered service, each driven by Parsons steam turbines that delivered over 68,000 shaft horsepower and sustained 25 knots or more. These were express Greyhounds built for the Blue Ribbon, slicing the Atlantic in under 5 days where Oceanic required 6. Their slender hulls, quadruple screws, and turbine smoothness made them marvels. Passengers marveled at the near absence of vibration, the electric glow of public rooms that rivaled London theaters. White Star responded with the Olympic class, starting with Olympic in 1911, but even these 46,000-ton behemoths, while larger and more luxurious, could not match the Cunard's raw pace. Oceanic, now a decade old, felt the comparison keenly. Her 90-knot service speed, once a virtue of reliability, now seemed measured and deliberate against the turbine rush. German competition added pressure. Norddeutscher Lloyd's Bremen and Europa, launched in the late 1920s but foreshadowed by pre-war designs, pushed boundaries further with streamlined hulls and higher power. Yet the real shift lay in propulsion itself. Turbines offered efficiency at high speeds, lower maintenance, and the promise of fuel oil over coal. Oceanic's 96 hand-fired furnaces and triple expansion engines, marvels in 1899, required armies of stokers. Newer ships reduced that labor while increasing endurance. Naval architects studied her balanced rudder and longitudinal framing with respect. But the future belonged to vessels that could outrun submarines and outpace rivals in peacetime commerce. Crew sensed the change during rare layovers. Engineers swapped stories with counterparts from Lusitania. She flies, one said of the Cunard, ours just endures. Officers noted how passengers, even in wartime, spoke wistfully of the new ships that promised shorter crossings and smoother rides. A junior engineer's diary entry from 1915 captured the mood. We still make our way steady and true, but the papers talk of turbines and oil. She's a queen, but queens can grow old. Oceanic's wartime role masked her obsolescence. The 10th Cruiser Squadron valued her size for carrying stores, her stability for winter patrols, her guns for deterrence. Yet every report of a Cunard or German liner breaking records deepened the quiet realization, the ship that had once redefined scale now represented the past. The Admiralty kept her in service through necessity, not sentiment. When the armistice came in 1918, Oceanic returned briefly to White Star colors, but the world had moved on. Reconversion to passenger service proved costly. Newer tonnage flooded the routes. She made a few post-war crossings, her decks once more filled with hopeful immigrants and returning soldiers, yet the spark had dimmed. The sound of progress was no longer the rhythmic thump of pistons, it was the steady whine of turbines in the distance, and soon, something even more revolutionary, the drone of aircraft engines overhead. The final crossing loomed, carrying not just passengers, but the weight of farewell to an era she had helped define. The dawn of September 8, 1914, broke cold and foggy over the North Sea, as RMS Oceanic steamed on what would become her unintended final patrol, a somber voyage where the crew's quiet farewells to the ship they loved mingled with the grim duties of war. Assigned to the Northern Patrol, Oceanic had left Scapa Flow days earlier, her gray camouflage blending with the slate-colored waves. Visibility dropped to mere yards in the Shetland haze, the bridge watch strained at binoculars, the single funnel's plume lost in mist. The hull, still the longest afloat from her era, cut through choppy seas at a cautious 14 knots, engines throttled back to conserve coal and listen for enemy echoes. The balanced rudder, once a pride of handling, now guided her through treacherous currents near Foul Reef, where uncharted rocks lurked beneath the surface. Wartime modifications added weight, guns, ammunition, splinter matting along the decks, shifting her metacentric height slightly, making her role more pronounced in the building swell. The deep dive into her end revealed navigational peril. Lieutenant Commander David Blair, navigating under Captain Smith's orders, plotted a course based on outdated charts. A fatal miscalculation placed the ship too close to the reef. At 5 a.m., the hull grated against submerged granite with a sickening shudder that vibrated through every frame. Water flooded the forward compartments, bulkheads held at first, but the damage proved mortal. Pumps labored against the ingress, their whine echoing in the engine rooms where firemen shoveled coal desperately to maintain steam for emergency maneuvers. Crew emotions ran high. Many had served her in peacetime, polishing brass and serving passengers. Now they faced abandonment. One seaman's later testimony in the court-martial inquiry described the scene. "She struck hard, and we knew she was done. The captain gave the order to abandon ship, come as you like, but leaving her felt like leaving family." Officers organized the evacuation with disciplined precision. Boats lowered into the fog, carrying all 400 men to safety on nearby destroyers in the island of Fala. No lives lost, but the ship settled on the reef, her bow submerged, superstructure tilting as waves claimed her. The aesthetic of her final hours lingered hauntingly, deck stripped of luxury, yet the grand lines of her profile, long, elegant, defiant, rose above the foam one last time. Crew watched from rescue vessels as she broke apart over days, her steel groaning in the wind. The emotional goodbye came in whispers and glances astern. Oceanic's end marked not just a loss, but the close of an innocent age. Yet her story endured, a steel ghost whispering lessons to the modern world. Even now, more than a century after her final plunge onto Foul Reef, RMS Oceanic lingers in the collective memory as a steel ghost whose quiet grandeur still haunts our modern world, a reminder that true maritime legend is forged not in speed or spectacle, but in the steady ambition to carry humanity across the deep with dignity. Her physical remains lie scattered in shallow waters off the Shetland Islands, twisted plates, boiler fragments, and sections of the once proud hull claimed by tide and storm. Divers occasionally visit the site, reporting how the long, elegant lines that once defined the horizon now rest broken yet recognizable beneath the kelp. Yet her true monument exists elsewhere, in archives, in photographs, in the yellowed passenger lists and crew memoirs that preserve the voices of those who knew her. Mark Churnside's detailed histories, the White Star Line archives, and the court-martial transcripts of her loss keep her story alive, allowing new generations to trace the arc from Belfast shipyard to wartime patrol. The human thread endures most powerfully. Thousands crossed on her decks, immigrants stepping into new lives, industrialists sealing fortunes, families fleeing hardship. Their letters and diaries speak of moments that transcended steel and steam, a child's first sight of the grand staircase, an elderly couple holding hands on the promenade as the sun set over the Atlantic, a steward's quiet kindness to a seasick passenger. These fragments form the emotional wake she left behind. One preserved account from a 1905 crossing reads, "Oceanic did not hurry us across the sea, she carried us with care, and we arrived not merely transported, but changed." Technically, her innovations rippled forward. The balanced rudder influenced steering designs for decades. Her longitudinal framing and generous beams set standards for stability in large passenger vessels. Engineers still study her engine arrangements as a high-water mark of reciprocating machinery before turbines took over. She bridged the transition from Victorian iron to Edwardian steel, proving that size could serve comfort rather than sacrifice it. Aesthetically, Oceanic embodied the confident elegance of her time. The restrained opulence, teak decks glowing in sunlight, electric chandeliers casting soft pools of light, mahogany paneling warm to the touch, evokes an era when travel itself was an event. Modern cruise ships, vast as floating cities, owe a debt to her vision of the ocean liner as a floating palace rather than a mere conveyance. Today she haunts us because she represents something we have largely lost, the romance of slow, deliberate progress across vast distances. In an age of jet travel and instant connection, her six-day crossings remind us that journeys once carried meaning beyond arrival. She was never the fastest, never the flashiest, yet she became the benchmark of civilized seafaring, proof that ambition, when tempered with care, can produce something enduring. As the last echoes of her engines fade into history, RMS Oceanic remains a quiet sentinel. Her wake, though invisible now, still ripples through time, a call to remember that the greatest ships do not conquer the sea, they earn its respect, passage by passage, soul by soul.